I'm here with Anna Carter from Eden Invitation, and we're center stage at a Focus conference here in front of 20,000 kids. No, we're in a little room we just found, and I just wanted to catch up. We've had you on the show before. I actually interviewed you at one of these before, then had you on the show. And since then, Eden Invitation has grown. Talk about your growth these past few years.
Yes. Yeah, it's been really exciting just to see a lot of different people, right, that are experiencing same-sex desires or just, wrestling with their sexuality, wrestling with their gender, who are really looking for answers in the church and looking for a way to live in congruence with the teachings of the church, the teachings of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so we've been expanding, what we offer. So we have a really robust online community. We
like
do
Zoom
small
meetings,
groues.
Or,
Well, we actually use the Discord platform.
Oh.
Actually, it's kind of ironic maybe with what we experience, but there's a lot of functionality there that's really helpful for us. So we have a robust online community. We do small groups. And we've also started doing local chapters. We call them hearth groups, where people meet locally and regionally on a monthly basis just to share life together, to pray together, to grow in fellowship and accountability in their life.
Roughly how many people will be involved with all of that?
Yes, we've received, over 1,000 different stories at least from different people, but, regularly participating, it's a few hundred, a couple hundred people.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And you attract the devout Catholic or non-Catholic, atheist, the whole gambit, or?
Most people have had some kind of Christian formation at least, right? Because we're pretty overt, if you go on our website, it's very obvious that we're Christian, that we're Catholic. And so people at least have to be open to that. So we definitely attract people that have been away from the church for a while and they're kind of edging their way back. And I think we attract a lot of people too that maybe have one foot out the door. They've been in the faith but they're just, for whatever reason, right, where they're feeling discouraged. They're not sure if this is the path they want to keep walking.
Right.
And they're kind of looking over their shoulder at other options out in the world. And we're maybe one of their last stops before they make that choice. And we have people that are pretty devout already, but they're saying, hey, this is part of my life and it doesn't seem to be going away. And I need some formation and community in this area.
Yeah. So sometimes you'd read books and do reflections like in the meetings and stuff and share about the book. And what are some of the typical books you would reflect on?
Yeah, so when we do our book clubs, we really look at a lot of kind of modern spiritual classics, so to speak. So we're reading, we read John Paul II. Obviously, we have theology of the body concepts that come out in what we're doing. But we've read books on the Holy Spirit and whatnot by, Jacques Philippe. We've read The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. Personal favorite is Read of God by Carol Houselander. He Leadeth Me by Father Walter Chiswick. So really, it's a lot of things about the spiritual life, right? And people that, endure, are dealing with loneliness or are dealing with suffering and are trying to find a framework to interpret that in their own lives. And so I think there's a lot of application there to sexuality and gender, especially, in the environment in the world today.
So it sounds like a lot of people that participate, they're looking for community first off, and maybe to understand the faith better as well. Is that kind of...
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel alone in this experience in the church. Sometimes when we do talk about it, I think sometimes it can kind of feel like an us versus them, or this is a problem out in the world that we need to deal with. When really there are people in the pews that have, are experiencing same-sex desires, are wrestling with their gender, have something kind of in that LGBTQ umbrella, so to speak.
Right.
And they're here and wondering what it means for them to live the Christian life and don't always know where to turn for that. And so I think we provide that for people.
Right. And what do you think, like, churches, priests, preachers, churches could do better and inviting people, of all stripes. I don't know how to say it. I don't know, but it's been a long day. I'm not sure if I'm saying anymore.
Right. I mean, I think just remembering we're in the pews. I think a couple things, especially from the pulpit, tone. Right? I think, again, a lot of times this comes up, and sometimes the tone can be combative or fear-driven because we're worried about the way society is going.
Yeah.
But recognizing that's not always helpful if someone's in the pews trying to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, well, are you afraid of me?
Yeah.
Are you angry at me?
Right.
Right?
They might be angry like at policy or curriculums.
Right, but just to kind of remember, hey, there's people in the pews with this experience, and what's the word of encouragement for them?
Right.
Right? Or to simply name it up front. You know, I think a lot of times maybe we talk about things that our congregations struggle with, and we maybe hit things like, oh, gossip or anger or something. But, you know, I know my pastor actually at my parish does a really great job about this. When he talks about lust, he actually rarely uses pronouns for it. He said when a person is lusting after another person, right? Or he'll open it up so that no matter what you're experiencing, you can find yourself in what he's saying.
Right.
And so just finding ways to kind of be more inclusive with that, I think is important. Just to be able to refer parishioners to the resources that exist, you know, organizations like EWTN or like Courage, so that people can have that direct support, even if the parish itself isn't offering it, but just to know that there's resources out there that exist for people to get connected with.
Right, right. And so maybe a typical person coming to Eden would be, they've had some bad experiences, you would think, or some alienating experiences that they...
I think so. You know, I think there are a lot of young adults today that have felt alienated by the church or hurt by the church. Or, I mean, saying the church, that's a big thing, but people in the church, right? And that could be an individual minister or leader of some kind, a pastor, or it could just be your uber Catholic grandma or something.
Right.
Translate that to be, the church did this or said this to me. You know.
And what is the message that the satisfying message maybe that you see take root in them? Is there a typical point of the gospel that is healing or fulfilling for the person experiencing same-sex attraction? Like that excites them, that keeps them coming back to Eden, you know, that keeps them in the church, that I might even be the Eucharist or the Rosary, Our Lady or something.
You know, I think it's a sense, I don't mean this to sound like trite or overdone, but it really is, I think, a personal encounter with Christ, right? I think a lot of John 6, you know, where in John 6, of course, we have this teaching. Jesus is talking about the Eucharist, you know, but they don't know it's the Eucharist at the time. They just know it's some strange thing about maybe cannibalism, right? Like what's going on here? Right. And there's a lot of people who leave and they say this saying is hard, who can accept it, right? Yeah. And I think the interesting thing with Peter, right, when Jesus turns to the disciples and said, do you too want to leave? You know, Peter doesn't say like, oh, of course I don't want to leave because I perfectly understand the doctrine of transubstantiation that you were trying to communicate to us here, right? No, he says like, where else would we go? Like you have the words of eternal life, right? Peter trusts Jesus even when he doesn't understand Jesus. And so I think being able to cultivate a very real sense of God's love for us, a sense that God has a purpose for my life, that no matter what I'm wrestling with, like God is coming to meet me there. And that even some of those longings that can feel messy and shameful and disordered, like God actually wants me to find him in that somehow, right? And that he has a purpose for my life, a purpose for self-gift for my life. There is a yes of discipleship, creative discipleship that's waiting for me, and I can have hope for my life.
Right.
So that wasn't just one idea. Sorry, that was a few.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, that fulfillment of desire and stuff. And then the sense of community that y'all have amongst one another, I think would be very healing, powerful, fulfilling. that they experience, right? Coming to Eden.
Right, because I think, all of us, desire relational intimacy, right?
Yeah.
And all of us desire to be known and loved in an incarnate way by other human beings.
Yeah.
And so being able to experience being around people who also are messy and striving and
Right,
unique and
right.
just trying to do our best to care for each other, right? In a way
Yeah.
that's congruent
Yeah.
with the gospel,
Yeah.
can be not just, can be healing, and it can also be really enlivening, right? It can be really joy filled, to know you're not alone in all of that.
Yeah. And do y'all look at it as a cross, like same-sex attraction, or how do you, I know Courage seemed like I don't know, I've heard different things from them about that, but how do y'all see that?
I think that any disordered desire in our lives needs to pass through the Paschal mystery, right? But we're not just meant to endlessly lap Calvary,
Right,
here's my cross and I'm just circling Calvary until I die, right? There are aspects of any disordered desire, I think, that involve pain and suffering, right? Because there's a way in which I want a fulfillment that can't be had in the here and now, right? A desire in myself that nothing in this world is going to satisfy, to paraphrase C.S. Lewis, right? And there's a death that has to happen, right? A death to self, to say, this isn't going to get satisfied the way that I want it to right now. But I can unite that death to self to Jesus. And there's ways in which he actually wants to rise in me through that, right? That in those experiences and through that, just through all of that, that his grace is alive and active in the midst of my surrender, and that actually it's something that can bear fruit in my life, that saying yes to Jesus in hard things can bear real fruit in the way I love God, the way I view myself, the charity I show to other people, the attentiveness to others' suffering that I might have in my life, the new avenues for creativity I might have, especially if it's someone who's going to be single for the Lord for the rest of their life, right? That there's ways in which God is going to rise to new life and call them to mission, right? The ascension is part of the Paschal mystery, right? And that I'm commissioned, actually, not just despite these experiences, right? But that they're part of my life and my story, and God could use them in ways I never would have anticipated.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because when in John's Gospel, chapter 12, talks about when I am lifted up, I'll draw all people to myself. And I know John Paul II wrote about, maybe it was Benedict, but it was that lifting up includes the ascension. He ascends to the right hand of the Father. And in a sense, that is the establishment of the kingdom, right? He's at the right hand of the Father, he's king. And so that's his kingdom being established on the cross and through the ascension. But I like the connection with the Great Commission, that, to me, it's funny in a great sense that, the apostles abandon him. He upbraids them, tells them where to go and what to do. And then he gives them this commission as he ascends into heaven, and go and make disciples of the whole world. They just had the most colossal failure of their lives. And it's the message isn't you. It is, but it isn't, right? The message is Jesus. But, your struggle, your personal cross is going to be a big part of your witness, right? But, go and proclaim. I love that connection because, that is our witness, I think. I mean, Catherine Drexel talked about the greatest work we have to do is to patiently and bear the cross and do the cross, right? And I think, our suffering and stuff, everybody can connect with that. Everybody has suffering. And so if Christianity speaks into that reality of people's lives and they see it, how we're dealing with it, they're listening then, right? So, I would think, same-sex attraction and stuff would have a very powerful message in this culture today to give. So, but what do you think? I know there's huge culture war going on right now, but some of the mistakes that maybe our secular presentation of it that damages people or misleads people. I'm just wondering, there's good and there's bad there. What
Mhm.
how would you describe that?
Well, I think in terms of what we just discussed, it's the fallacy of the resurrection without the cross,
Yeah.
right? Where there's a sense that, you embrace this experience as an inevitability of behavior, right? That like embracing this, there's no embracing of a cross, right? There's just an embracing of like, oh, I'm attracted to the same sex, or I feel like I am the opposite sex, right? And so in order to be fulfilled, I need to kind of rise again on the other side as somebody who's in these relationships, right? Or is altering my my body, right? To match that. And that is what's going to fulfill me, right? That's where the happiness is going to come. And I think there are ways in which I would say, yeah, we need to embrace this as a reality, right? Like these discordant experiences of sexuality and gender are a reality that we can't just pretend aren't there.
Right.
Right. And we can't just wish them away, and so I think there's something to it. But then obviously when you kind of go down that road, antagonistic to moral law, you're going to have problems, right? You're going to have problems one way or another.
Right.
And so I think that's definitely problematic. And then I think something else, though, you mentioned the good. I do think there is a sense there of, there's a real sense of trying to support people, right? Now we don't love everything they're supporting them in, but there's a real built-in sense of like, let's try to support people. Let's kind of build these communities and all of that I think the church needs to be doing. We actually have the best roadmap for that, right? In our faith, and we need to be, doubling down on that, I think, in our relationships with people.
Yeah, those are great points. The whole identity, I mean, I remember Father Harvey gave us a talk at the seminary, and he was really, he didn't see it as, saying this is my identity. We're a human person that experiences this. Do you agree with that, or is that your approach? Or, I mean, to say like, I'm a homosexual person, I mean, it's like the next natural step is say, well, of course I have to act on it, right? This is my identity.
I think it's tricky. I mean, I think I agree in principle, right? With the fact that, this is not constitutive of a person's identity, right? We're a human being. We're an adopted son or daughter of the Father, like on an ontological level, if we want to, if we want to use that word, on the level of being, right? That there's, that's not who I am, right? This is an experience that I have, right? I think it gets a little trickier, though. Personally, I think when we start to kind of police the adjectives that people use to describe their experiences, right? Because I think there's a lot of adjectives that we do use. I'm a sinner, right? I'm an alcoholic, right? People, use those terms, and so we use a lot of adjectives to describe aspects of our experience and aspects of our lives, and we're okay with that in a lot of settings.
Right.
And so I don't necessarily take issue if somebody says, oh, I'm going to describe my experiences as homosexual or as gay or as lesbian or as same-sex attracted, right? Because I think people are sorting through their experiences and trying to give name to them. Now, if someone is then taking a leap to say, even in the Catechism says homosexual persons or persons with homosexual tendencies, and then the CDF or DDF now says that too, right? And so we have within the church using it as an adjective, at the highest levels of doctrinal authority. So I think we have to be careful, obviously, what do we mean when we say that, and if I mean by that this is constitutive of my identity and now I'm going to go act on it, well, of course that's problematic. But that would be problematic for anybody, right? If someone says, oh, I'm an alcoholic, well, that means, and I'm not comparing them because I think the two things are the same. I just want to be very clear about that. I'm just trying to give an example where we seem as a church to be okay with adjectives associated with sin. Right. And so, are we using that word because I'm acknowledging this is an experience that I have that I'm trying to work on?
Right.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I guess some of the thing I took, my understanding was like to reduce a person to sexual attraction. I mean, even within the heterosexual bandwidth of it, or there could be some, some, what's the word, some perversions or something, and that we're more than our sexual desires, right? That we're a human person loved by God, child of God, and that, I don't know, I guess that's some of the things I think about sometimes, but.
Well, and I think that goes for anything, right? I mean, I used to work in youth ministry, and there's so many talks about, don't identify yourself as the jock, or don't identify yourself as the artist, or don't identify, we all, I think, need to be called back to that, right? I think there's a lot of us in this country. Are we more American or are we more Catholic? But there's a lot of adjectives and ways that we could view ourselves that I think can become problematic if they become the dominant narrative in our hearts. Right? Yeah. But I don't think it's wrong to name it's part of your life.
Right. Can you share some of your own story of maybe people listening would identify with your story?
Sure. Yeah, so I think in my own experience, I was very much a church kid growing up. I was raised by very devout parents, went to youth group, went on to get a theology degree. That I very much wanted to. At Steubenville, yes, very much love Jesus and serve Him, and but I noticed these attractions in my heart, starting in high school. And I was really afraid of them. I was really ashamed. Wasn't really talked about a lot in growing up, except for kind of in a culture war terminology, or issues within the hierarchy or clergy or something, and so I didn't know how to relate to it. I didn't know how to talk about it. So I kept a lot of that hidden. And then, of course, when you keep things hidden and never look at them or think about them, they emerge in really healthy ways later, right?
Yeah.
No, not so much.
Sideways.
Yeah. And so, and so I think for me, though, there was definitely a time where I kind of had to say, oh, this is what's happening. I need to be honest with myself. These ways that I'm interacting with women are not virtuous, this isn't helpful for me. This isn't helpful to my holiness. And I have to make some choices here, about what am I going to do? Who am I going to follow? How am I going to live? And so ultimately just kind of coming back, like I mentioned earlier, to that kind of John 6 moment of no, I know that Jesus has the words of everlasting life. I know that my experiences of grace have been real in my life. And that's how I want to live. And that's who, I want to keep choosing Jesus. Yeah. And so that's what I've been trying to do.
All right. And your full-time ministry.
Yes, which brings its own challenges, right? When you're,
and you're in St. Paul, you said? Okay. Minnesota. So.
Yes.
All right. Well, keep up the good work, and
thank you.
Praying for you all, and hope things go well and continues to grow. And get on Zoom,
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for talking today.
Okay.